The name of the story, Where the Rain Fell. Chapter 1. The Passage Beneath the Rain. The rain had begun without warning. No gradual softening of the air, no thunder in the distance, just a sudden hush, like the world had collectively inhaled. Paris blinked beneath it, windows fogged, rooftops glistened, and the sky spilled its quiet sorrow across the cobblestones. Margot hadn't planned on walking, but her suitcase sat behind the counter of a small bookstore she would never return to, and the wedding dress, now soaked and clinging, was folded beneath her coat. She wore the scarf her sister had given her that morning, still smelling faintly of lavender and home. Her hair stuck to her neck and cheeks. Her shoes, ivory, never meant for walking, were already ruined. She didn't care. She walked with no destination, past shuttered bakeries, through alleyways that whispered old poems, across bridges slick with water and ghosts. It was almost beautiful how the city refused to notice her. Paris had seen women like her before, undone, uncertain, full of music they no longer trusted. When she turned into the underpass at Montparnasse, it was only because the rain had grown heavier, not because she sought shelter. But the moment she stepped inside the passage, she stopped. There was someone already there. A boy, or a young man, really, sat cross-legged on an overturned crate, his back resting against the wet stone wall. A faded typewriter perched on his lap, and despite the weather, he was typing. Slowly, deliberately, with the kind of attention usually reserved for confessionals or wounds. His coat was worn, his scarf ink-stained. A small thermos of something warm steamed beside him. The only light came from the street lamp outside the tunnel, catching him at an angle that made him look like a character from a story too old to be remembered properly. She might have walked past him. She should have. But he looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Paris disappeared. Emile wasn't used to being seen while he wrote. Most people glanced and moved on, curious for half a second, then off to catch trains, make appointments, kiss someone under an umbrella. But she stopped. That was the first thing he noticed. She didn't move. The second, she looked like she had no intention of pretending she wasn't breaking. Her hair was plastered to her forehead. Her coat, once elegant, probably expensive, clung to her knees. She looked like something had ended, and she had walked straight out of it into this tunnel. He didn't speak first. She did. "Are you writing letters?" Her voice was hoarse, but not from crying. It sounded like someone who had spent hours talking inside her own head. "I am," he said. "For strangers. For anyone who doesn't know what to say out loud." Margot swallowed. "Do you ever write for yourself?" He hesitated. "No." She stepped closer. The water from her coat dripped onto the stones. "Could you write one for me?" He glanced at the typewriter. "What would you want it to say?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the opposite side of the tunnel and leaned against the wall. Her shoulders sagged like she hadn't realized how tired they were. Then she said, very quietly, "Write to the version of me that still believes in staying." Emile felt something shift. Not in the air, in him. He nodded, rolled a fresh sheet of paper into the machine, and began to type. "Dear you, you woke up one morning and remembered how heavy pretending can be. You took off your smile like a coat that didn't fit anymore. And you walked into the rain, not to disappear, but to return to yourself. You are not wrong to leave, even if no one understands, even if it means being alone for a while, even if it means silence. Some departures are the first step toward remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. A stranger who sees you." He pulled the paper out, folded it in half, and stood. She hadn't moved. When he held out the letter, she took it with both hands, carefully, as if it might tear. She read it once, then again. She didn't cry, but she exhaled, slow, deep, and something invisible left her body. When she looked up at him, there was something different in her eyes. Not trust exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. "I don't know who you are," she said, "but thank you. I don't know who you are either." She gave a faint, tired smile. "Then maybe that's fair." They left the underpass when the rain softened into a mist, thin enough to walk through without needing to hide. The streets shimmered under the weight of water. Reflections danced on the cobblestones like ghost versions of the city. Margot didn't speak for a while. Her hands were tucked deep in her pockets, the letter he'd written folded carefully inside. She walked slightly behind Emil, not because she didn't trust him, but because the distance helped her remember that she was still real. "Do you always sit in tunnels writing letters?" she asked finally. "Only the ones with good echoes," Emil replied. She smiled faintly. "Why not cafes or parks?" "Too noisy. Too watched. In tunnels, people are too busy avoiding eye contact." He glanced at her. "You didn't avoid it." "No," she said, almost to herself. "I think I needed someone to look back." They turned a corner and crossed a quiet square. A single street lamp buzzed overhead. Somewhere, a distant accordion player tried the same phrase again and again, never quite getting it right. Emil paused outside a small florist shop, its shutters halfway down, but a few blooms still displayed under a slanted awning. The air smelled faintly of damp petals and green stems. He leaned in and picked up a small bouquet, violets and chamomile. "For you," he said. Margot hesitated. "Why?" "Because sometimes the city forgets to give people something gentle." She took the flowers carefully, as though they might melt in her hands. "I don't know how to accept kindness without preparing for it to be taken back." "Then don't accept it. Just hold it for now." She nodded. "That I can do." They walked again, this time side by side. Occasionally their shoulders brushed, but neither pulled away. The streets narrowed and darkened. Old stone buildings loomed above them like sleeping giants, windows like half-lidded eyes. "Who were you writing to before I interrupted you?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "A woman I've never met," he said at last. "I write to her every few weeks. I don't know her name. I don't even know if she reads them. I leave the letters in different corners of the city." "Why?" "Because maybe one day, someone who needs it will find it." Margot looked at him, surprised. "You really believe in strangers?" "No," he said, "but I believe in what people hide from themselves. Sometimes strangers are the only ones who see it." They reached a narrow rooftop entrance, one of those places only locals seem to know about. Emil led her up the spiral stairs, past forgotten doorways, to a flat rooftop that looked out over the Seine. The river glowed, not brightly, but like the last breath of a song. There were no other people, only wind, only stars veiled behind moving clouds. Emil sat on the ledge, legs hanging over, careless in the way of someone who wasn't afraid to fall. Margot stayed a step back, her fingers curling around the flowers he'd given her. "You know," he said, "there are thousands of people in this city right now, laughing, drinking, holding hands. And here we are." She tilted her head. "Do you wish you were one of them?" "No, but I wonder if they wish they were us." Margot laughed, a soft, broken sound like something unused for too long. "You're strange. I prefer romantic. Romantic is for people who don't have to live with the ending." Emil looked at her. "Do you think this has an ending?" "Everything does." "Maybe," he said, "but maybe not tonight." She looked out at the rooftops, then down at her shoes, still damp and delicate and ruined. "I was supposed to be married today. I guessed. It was going to be perfect. White dress, garden ceremony, vows rehearsed to the syllable. And I stood in front of the mirror, and I didn't see myself. I saw someone trying too hard to be loved." Emil didn't interrupt. "I kept waiting for the right moment to speak. But sometimes silence fills the space so tightly, there's no room for truth." "You left in a dress?" She nodded, walked straight through the garden, climbed a wall in heels, threw the bouquet into the Seine. A pause. "That last part was dramatic," she admitted. He smiled. "All good stories are." Later, as the wind picked up and the city darkened, Margot sat beside Emil on the ledge. He took a small old camera from his coat pocket. "May I take a photo?" "Just one." She hesitated. "I look awful." "You look like someone who stopped pretending." He didn't wait for her answer, just lifted the camera gently and clicked. "No flash, no posing." Just her in the moment, a ghost of a smile, wind in her hair, the night behind her. By the time they left the rooftop, Paris was stirring. The city didn't wake loudly. It shifted, with soft clinks of dishes in cafes, distant footsteps, the muffled clatter of morning deliveries. A breeze curled through the narrow streets, carrying the scent of fresh bread, warm milk, and damp pavement. Emil led the way to a small cafe near Rue de Martyrs. It had no sign above the door, only ivy growing up the brick and an open window that played quiet jazz to the street. They slipped inside like they belonged there. The waitress didn't ask questions. She just smiled, the kind of smile that had seen all kinds of people walk through these doors, and brought 2 espressos, a shared croissant, and warm milk in a chipped porcelain jug. Margot sat across from Emile, her coat now dry, her fingers curled around the small cup. The flowers he'd given her lay gently on the table, their petals open, unafraid. "Do you come here often?" she asked. "When I want to write without writing." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a thing." Emile grinned. "Sure, I pretend to write, but really I watch, eavesdrop, collect other people's moments." He pointed to a couple at the window, elderly, holding hands, sharing a newspaper. Every Tuesday, she lets him read the headlines first, even though she reads faster. Why? Because he used to be a journalist, and it still makes him feel useful. Margot looked at them again, softer now. "That's cruelly tender." He nodded. "That's Paris." She stirred her milk into the coffee slowly, as if trying to make the moment last longer. Her voice dropped when she spoke again. "I haven't been in a place like this since before." "Before what?" "Before I became the girl who leaves her own wedding." Emile waited. She met his eyes. "Before I was good at things. I remembered birthdays. I wrote letters on real paper. I read poems out loud. I didn't flinch when people said love. And now, I flinch." He leaned in slightly. "Can I tell you something?" "Always. I don't think you left because you couldn't love. I think you left because you knew it would never be enough if it wasn't real." She blinked. The words hit gently like falling snow, but settled deep. "No one said that to me," she whispered. "Not once. They didn't see you." Her voice cracked. "Neither did I." Emile reached across the table and tapped the folded letter still in her pocket. "You will." When they stepped out of the cafe, the sun had fully arrived. It spilled golden light across balconies, turned puddles into mirrors, and painted their shadows long on the sidewalk. Margot turned toward him, suddenly aware of how quiet it had become between them. Not uncomfortably, but like the end of a song. "I should go," she said. Emile nodded, slowly. "Will you be all right?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'll be real." He smiled at that. "Good." She took a step back. "You don't even know my name." "I don't need to," he said, "but I hope I'll hear it again someday." A pause. Then she said, very quietly, "Margot." He repeated it, almost reverently. "Margot." She turned to go, then stopped. "Will you keep writing letters?" "Yes." "For strangers?" He met her eyes. "For you." Then she walked away. She didn't look back. But Emile sat on a nearby bench, opened his notebook, and began to write. "Dear Margot, this morning you became someone new. Not because you changed, but because you stopped hiding. You will ache. You will question. You will wake up some days and wonder if you imagined it all. But I was there, and I saw you." Chapter 2. The Days Between Margot. 3 days passed before she unpacked her bag. The wedding dress, still crumpled and silent, lay across the back of the armchair like a ghost waiting to be acknowledged. Margot didn't touch it. She walked past it every morning, every night, as if its presence proved she'd truly left. The apartment she rented was small, an attic flat in Montmartre with slanted ceilings and windows that opened to the sound of pigeons. The walls were bare, except for one thing, the bouquet Emile had given her, pressed now between 2 books, drying, fading, but still undeniably hers. She hadn't meant to stay in Paris. She had a return ticket. She didn't use it. Instead, she started walking. Not far, not with purpose, just aimless wandering between cafes, bridges, alleyways. Places that might remember that evening better than she could. She didn't see Emile. She didn't look for him. But every time she passed a tunnel or sat on a bench with a view of the river, she wondered if she was standing inside someone else's letter. She began writing again. At first, just scattered thoughts on napkins, receipts, margins of guidebooks. Then full pages, folded carefully and tucked into drawers. Never mailed. One of them began, "Dear someone who looked at me like I was real. I remember the way you said my name. Not like it was a label, but like it was a story. I wonder if you still write to strangers. I wonder if any of them were me." She didn't cry when she wrote it. but her hands trembled as she folded the page. Her old life, meanwhile, caught up with her. Her sister called 10 times in a single day, then once more, and left a voice message. "You don't have to explain. Just say you're alive. Please." She didn't reply. Not because she didn't love her, but because explaining meant choosing the words that made her feel like a villain, or worse, a fool. And she was tired of choosing. On the 4th day, a letter arrived. No return address. No name. Inside, a photograph. Black and white. Softly grainy. Her face, from the rooftop. Eyes half closed. Wind-blown hair. Vulnerability like candlelight. On the back, written in uneven ink. Proof. You didn't imagine it. She pressed it to her chest and stood still for a very long time. Emile. He didn't go back to the passage. Not because it hurt, but because the silence was too loud there now. Instead, he buried himself in music. He lived in a narrow apartment above a bookstore, where the floorboards creaked and the piano sat crooked in the corner. He played late into the night, chords searching for shape, melodies half-formed. He wasn't writing songs. He was remembering her through sound. One night, he composed a piece and called it Rue d'Ambers. It was full of unresolved notes, like someone walking away without saying goodbye. His best friend, Lucien, dropped by with coffee and sarcasm. "You haven't shaved." "I'm creating." Lucien snorted. "She broke your heart, didn't she?" Emile didn't answer. Lucien leaned against the window. "You know what's funny about you? You fall in love with strangers like it's an Olympic sport." "She wasn't a stranger," Emile said quietly. "Oh, she told me her name." Lucien raised an eyebrow. "So, that's more than most people do." He began to carry a notebook again. Not the one from before, but a new one. Inside, page after page, fragments of letters never sent. "Dear Rooftop Ghost, I hope you found a place to belong, even if it's not with me. I hope you speak your name out loud every morning, just to remember it's still yours." A week passed. The city moved on, it always does. But neither Margot nor Emile could walk its streets without seeing the shape of the other in every shadow, every reflection, every note of silence. And so they did what people do when they don't know what to do. They wrote, and waited, and wondered if the other was doing the same. It was the sound that did it. She had just turned the corner at Place de Furstenberg, the kind of quiet square that didn't need tourists to be beautiful, when she heard it. A piano. Soft. Searching. Fragile as lace, and just as intricate. She stood still. The world dimmed around the edges. The notes weren't loud. They weren't even played with confidence, but they were honest. As if someone had pressed his fingers to the keys with the care of someone touching memory. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew. It was him. She followed the sound. It led her to a gallery tucked behind a vine-covered courtyard. Inside, an installation, photographs, shadows, handwritten lines projected onto gauze. And in one corner, a small upright piano, unattended, playing, or, rather, being played by a recording. She stepped closer. A placard, Rue des Ombres by Emile. Her breath caught. The melody twisted and turned. It wasn't a love song. Not really. It was an attempt to say something that words never quite could. She sat on a bench nearby and listened to it 3 times. The 3rd time, she wept. Not the loud kind of weeping. The quiet kind, where tears slide down, uninvited, and land on a collarbone already too exposed. Someone offered her a tissue. She shook her head. She needed this. Not as an answer, but as proof that she wasn't the only one remembering. Later, she bought a postcard from the gallery's gift corner. Blank on the back. She wrote, "You're not the only one who stayed. I hear you. Even now." She didn't sign it. She left it on the piano. Emile. He was walking home along Rue de Lille when he heard someone humming. Not just anyone, a child sitting on the step of a bookshop, legs swinging, head tilted, humming his song. He stopped. "Where did you hear that?" The girl shrugged. "Inside. They were playing it. The one about the rainy street." Emile stepped in. The bookseller, a gray-haired woman with half-moon glasses, recognized him instantly. "You're the boy who leaves notes in books." "Guilty." She smiled. "You also play that piece, don't you? Rue des Ombres?" "Yes. Someone left this for you." She handed him a small square of card, a gallery postcard. His hand shook slightly. He turned it over and read the words. You're not the only one who stayed. I hear you. Even now. No name. But he knew. It was her. He stayed in the bookshop until closing. The owner gave him tea. He didn't speak. He just held the card in both hands and stared at it like it was an anchor. That night, he didn't write music. He wrote a letter. Margot, if this city ever brought two people together by accident, I think it might also bring them back together by choice. If you're still here, really here, meet me. Same rooftop. Friday. Sunset. Bring the silence. I'll bring the words. 2 days later, Margot stood in her apartment, holding the letter. It had arrived tucked into a novel at her local bookstore. She didn't know how, but she knew who. She reread it 4 times. Then she circled Friday on the calendar. With red ink, the city glowed. Not the harsh, electric kind of glow, but the honeyed light of sunset spilling slowly over rooftops, gilding chimneys, and softening the cracks in every stone. Margot climbed the staircase as if every step held memory. By the time she reached the top, the air had turned still. A single gust of wind danced past her, as if Paris itself was holding its breath. The rooftop was unchanged. The same rusted railing, the same overturned crate, the same sky beginning to blush, and Emile, leaning against the wall, holding a folded paper, like he had been waiting forever. When he saw her, something in him broke open, but he didn't move. Neither did she. Silence stood between them, vast, delicate. Then, I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either, she replied. He smiled. It wasn't the charming kind. It was the tired, honest kind, the one that said, I've missed you more than I let myself believe. They stood there, letting the sky turn gold. Finally, he spoke again. You got my letter. She nodded. And I left you mine. Then we're even? No, she whispered. You gave me more. He tilted his head. Ow, you saw me. That night. No one else did. Not even me. He stepped closer. I didn't just see you, Margot. I remembered you. Her breath caught. But she looked down. I'm not someone worth remembering. Why do you say that? Because I leave things. I left someone who loved me. I left a version of myself that people counted on. I left my future, the one everyone thought I was supposed to have. You didn't leave love, he said gently. You left expectation. Tears welled. She blinked them back. He reached for her hand, paused, and then, slowly, she let him take it. Their fingers threaded together, trembling. You said, she whispered, that you write letters for strangers. I did, and now, I write for you. Her voice cracked. But I'm still a stranger. He brought her hand to his chest. Not to me. They sat on the ledge as the sun slipped lower, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. He unfolded the paper he had brought. It was a new letter. Dear Margot, I don't want to be the boy who was only part of one day in your life. But if that's all I'm allowed, I'll keep it. I'll keep the rain and the way you held the flowers like they were breakable. I'll keep the silence in that cafe and the way you said your name like it wasn't yours yet. I'll keep the music I wrote with your absence in every note. I'll keep you, even if I have to let you go. He folded it again and didn't look at her. Margot wiped her eyes. The silence between them had changed. Not heavier, but full. You said something the first night, she whispered. What? That I left because I knew it wasn't real. He nodded. You were right. He turned to her. And you, she said, you were the first thing that felt real after. A pause. Then she asked, so what'll we do with that? He answered slowly. We let be true. And then, he looked at her, really looked. And she already knew the answer. I'm not ready to stay, she whispered. I know. I don't know where I'm going. I don't need to know. But He stopped her with a touch. Just a light graze of his fingers along her cheek. Then, very gently, he kissed her. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't the kind of kiss that begged for forever. It was the kind that said, this moment mattered, even if it's all we get. When they pulled apart, the last rays of sunlight lit her hair like fire. She stood. He didn't ask her to stay, and she didn't ask him to follow. They simply looked at each other, one last time, as if memorizing the lines of a face that would echo through dreams. Then she walked away. down the staircase, back into the city, and he stayed, on the rooftop that remembered. Chapter 3. The distance between Margot. 1 year later. She was living in Lisbon now. The apartment was small, warm, cluttered with postcards and empty cups. The windows opened on tiled rooftops and gulls that screamed like restless thoughts. She worked at a second-hand bookstore by the sea, sorting forgotten words into new places. People called her quiet. She didn't mind. Sometimes, when no one was around, she would sit on the back steps and write. Not poetry, not essays, just fragments, a paragraph here, a line there. Words that didn't want to be held too tightly. I still hear the rain before it falls. And sometimes I think about the rooftop, how silence is louder when shared. She kept a box under her bed. Inside, letters. Some sealed, some not. Some addressed to E. Some to the one who waited. None were mailed. One afternoon, a street musician began to play on a corner across from the bookshop. At first, she didn't notice. Lisbon was full of sounds. But then the notes reached her. Simple, intimate, a tune she hadn't heard in months, but had never really forgotten. Her heart stopped. Rue des Ombres. She ran outside. It wasn't him. Just a young boy, maybe 16, playing from sheet of music, bent by wind and time. She asked where he got the piece. He pointed to a music school flyer stuck to his case. There, in the fine print, composed by Émile R. Paris. That night, she opened a new notebook. On the first page, she wrote, "He's still playing, and I'm still listening." Émile. His life had grown louder. After the rooftop, after she left, he had tried to move on. He didn't. He made music instead. The gallery piece had drawn attention. Then came invitations. Then a record label. Then the interviews, the late nights, the applause. But no one asked the questions he wanted to answer. No one asked, who was she? So he answered silently. Through melody. Through restraint. Through songs that never fully resolved. His second album was titled Letters I Never Sent. Track 3, Montmartre Ghost. Track 7, Red Circle on Friday. Final track, Goodbye Without Blame. At night, he still walked the streets of Paris alone. Not looking for her. Not anymore. But remembering. He had a box too. Not of letters. Of photographs. Not of her. But of places. The tunnel where they met. The cafe with the single red chair. The rooftop. And on the back of each, a single line of a story only he would ever read. One day, a journalist asked, "Is your music about someone specific?" Émile smiled. Always. He thought about writing to her. He even drafted messages. But he never sent them. Because what do you say to the person who was your turning point? What do you offer when you can't offer forever? Then, one afternoon, as he waited in line at a flower stall near Gare de Lyon, a familiar voice behind him said, "Peonies?" He turned, but it wasn't her. Just a stranger. Still, for 1 second, his chest had remembered what it meant to hope. That evening, he wrote, "Margot, you're not fading, just becoming quieter, like a song after the last note. But I still know the melody by heart. Always yours, E." He placed the letter in the box with the others. Unsent, but not forgotten. Rain came early that year. The streets shimmered with it, and Margot walked home soaked, her boots squelching, a second-hand umbrella turned inside out. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind she thought she'd misplaced somewhere on that Paris rooftop. In her pocket, a book someone left behind at the store. She didn't know why she took it home. It wasn't her taste, but something about the title felt familiar. All the ways we almost stayed. She curled into her armchair, wrapped in a blanket, and opened to the first page. Something fluttered out. A letter. Folded. Cream-colored. Smudged at the edges. Not addressed. Not signed. She read, "I wonder how many times we were in the same place without knowing. Maybe I passed by you in a train station, or walked by the street you were staying on. Maybe you heard my music and didn't realize it was meant for you. But here you are, reading this. And maybe that means we're closer than we think. If you ever find this, write back. You'll know how." Her heart stopped. She turned the page. In the corner, printed in Prague. First edition. She stared at the book. At the note. Was it Émile? Or someone else who wrote like him? Émile, Prague. 3 weeks earlier. He had played a set in a quiet old theater. The kind with velvet curtains and flickering chandeliers. The audience had been still, listening, breathing with him. After the show, he stayed behind. He wandered the city alone that night. No camera, no notebook, just breath, and cold, and a longing he no longer named. He stopped at a bookstore lit with candlelight. Inside, a dusty corner with forgotten titles. He left a letter, and signed, inside the first book that caught his eye. He didn't expect anything. He just needed to send something out into the world. Margot, Lisbon. The next morning, she wrote a note. Small, simple. I found it. It was Prague. Of course it was. You still write the way I remember. Here's how you'll know it's me. I never sign my name either, but I always write in blue ink. She tucked it into a postcard of Lisbon's yellow tram. No stamp, no address, but she knew where to leave it. At the bookstore's poetry section, between two books Emile once quoted, Rilke and Pervert. 1 week later, Paris. A girl with sea-green earrings browsed the poetry shelf. She pulled out Pervert, flipped through it, and blinked at the card that fell into her hand. She looked around. No one watching. She read it, smiled. 2 days later, she was on a train to Paris with the card in her pocket. She left it at the small cafe near Montmartre, the one with the red chair. The waiter, an old man with a mustache, found it while cleaning. He smiled. He knew who it was for. That night, Emile sat down at his usual table. The waiter handed him the card. No words, just the look of someone who's been part of a love story without ever asking to be. Emile read the note in silence. And for the first time in months, maybe years, he whispered, "Thank you." Later that week, Paris. Emile didn't write back. Not yet. Instead, he found the book he left in Prague, bought a copy of the same edition, opened it to the first page, wrote inside, "Found, and still finding. Meet me, not for answers, just for a beginning. Library of Echoes. Florence, August 4th, noon. I'll be reading Rilke, probably aloud. You know me." Florence was soft that morning. The heat hadn't settled yet, and the streets smelled of oranges and old stone. Bells rang somewhere in the distance, lazy, half awake. Margot stood outside the library at 11:59. A quiet building. Stucco walls, wooden doors, windows that blinked with the sun. She almost turned away. Almost. But then the door creaked open, and someone walked out holding a copy of Rilke, worn, dog-eared, underlined in blue ink. She stepped inside. The Library of Echoes wasn't famous. It was hidden near a fountain tourists rarely found, tucked between two forgotten churches. Inside, narrow aisles, crooked ladders, books stacked in corners like sleeping cats. And silence, the kind that feels like listening. Margot moved slowly, her sandals brushing against stone. She found the poetry section. At first, no one. Then she heard it. A voice. Low, measured, reading aloud just barely. "Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." She turned, and there he was, sitting cross-legged on the floor, back against the shelf, book open in his lap. Emile. He hadn't seen her yet. He was reading to no one. Or maybe to her, even before he knew she was there. She stepped forward. He looked up. Time didn't stop, but it bent quietly. Neither of them spoke at first. She sat down beside him, legs folded, arms loose. The book stayed open between them. He smiled, small, almost shy. "You came," he said. She nodded. "You were reading Rilke. I always read Rilke when I don't know what to say. And now..." He looked at her. "Now I'm terrified I'll say too much." "Then don't," she whispered. "Let's just sit." And they did. For a long time. Two people in a library, in a foreign city, saying nothing, and somehow saying everything. Outside, the bells rang again. Inside, he finally asked, "Do you want coffee?" She shook her head. "Not yet. Just this." They stayed. Eventually, words returned. They talked about Lisbon, about Prague, about the music and the letters and the almosts. They didn't talk about Paris. Not directly, but it hovered there, not heavy, not painful, just present, like the scent of something you once wore. At one point, she asked, "Did you wait for me?" He thought, "No, I lived, but I never stopped hoping. And now, I don't know, maybe this is enough." They walked through Florence in the evening, not holding hands, not needing to. They stopped at a bridge. The sun was falling like a slow breath. The river shimmered. Margot leaned on the stone edge. "You still love me?" she asked. Emile didn't answer right away. Then, "I love who you were. I love who you are. And I probably love whoever you'll become. But I don't want to keep you. I just want you to know I never forgot." She turned to him, eyes bright. "I didn't either." That night, they sat on the roof of her guest house. The stars came slowly. He took out a folded piece of paper, not a letter. "Sheet music. Something I wrote. For you." She looked at the title. The space between notes. He didn't play it. He just handed it to her. Like a gift. Like closure. Or maybe like a door left slightly open. The next morning, they said goodbye. No tears. No promises. Just one last look. Real, steady, and a kiss that wasn't about possession or hope or regret. Just presence. And that was enough. Epilogue. Years later, in a coastal town Margot would one day call home, a child walked into a record shop. She pointed to an old vinyl. "Letters I Never Sent. Emile R." Her mother smiled gently. "I used to know him," she said. "Was he nice?" The mother paused. "Yes," she said. "He taught me that love doesn't have to last to be real." The child didn't understand. But someday she would. The end. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.